Welcome to the Mondovo Agency One-on-One series. We interview successful marketing agency owners who share their learnings and experiences from running a successful agency. Learn from their successes and failures to build a better agency yourself. We get you revenue figures, actual customer experiences, and practical case studies. The Agency One-on-One series is brought to you by Mondovo. Mondovo is your ultimate all-in-one tool set that saves you hundreds of hours a month in managing your SEO and social media campaigns.
Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining another great episode of Mondovo 101. My name is Bala and I would be your host. Today we are going to talk to a person whom I personally admire for his thoughts and beliefs. He's a software engineer, he's an inventor, he's an angel investor, writer, speaker, and I can keep on going with that. Of course, he has co-founded 3 companies, including the web development agency Project Ricochet. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Casey Cobb. Casey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me on.
Very good. It's a pleasure that you have taken some time and joining us today. So the introduction, whatever I have given there, Casey, is just a small part. I know there's a lot of things behind that particular thing. Could you tell our audience, something about yourself and where you started and the whole story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just related to Ricochet or beyond that? So Ricochet is the agency. So
right.
I think that's kind of what you're focused on, right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So I had just sold one of my previous companies, and I've been doing freelance web development since I was in high school. And my business partner, who at the time was just a friend from college, we went to college together, he was also doing freelancing, and I was looking for a new opportunity. And we decided that with his passion for elegant technical solutions and my passion for business, and kind of the crossover between our excitement for the opportunities for the web and development at the time, that we could work to make an agency rather than just 2 dudes in an office slinging out code. So we started slowly adding to our team and taking on work and incrementally increasing, and now we're at about 25 people, including admin staff and some part-timers, and but it's really exciting to be involved in seeing something grow from the very inception, when you have a belief that you can make something bigger than yourself, and then to actually execute on that with a really great team.
Perfect. Very good. So when did you all started? Which year?
So it must have been around 2010 or so, I want to say. Maybe even 2009, like the tail end of 2009.
Wow, cool. So how many employees right now you have?
So we're, like I said, we're at a team of 25. And like I said, it's a lot of personalities, a lot of really talented folks.
Very good. I did notice that, a lot of pretty interesting way you have actually put your new website, like for everybody's profile and the way they've been interested into. And now, when I was kind of looking into your website, like I understood like you are into web development agency, doing a lot of stuff there. Especially your projects are pretty different. And one thing I particularly noticed, that is the entrepreneur package that you have. Okay, which nobody else has kind of got that, and I want to know more about it. What is that?
Yeah. So this to me is a really important. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. So when somebody comes up with an idea for something, I think it's really tempting to kind of get sucked into that narrative that I've got this idea, it's going to be amazing, I'm going to mortgage my house, I'm going to go all in, and I am going to become a billionaire, right? And that almost never happens. And so what the entrepreneur package is the opportunity for us to help, in an unbiased, impartial way, us to help folks who have an idea develop that idea, understand the cost implications of that idea. And I think one of the big things that our agency is all about is the 80% solution. So you're familiar, Bala, with the 80-20 rule?
Absolutely, Pareto's rule.
Yeah. So if you can get the 80% solution, you're going to be able to get it on 20% of the cost, right? So if you potentially had a budget of $100,000 and you were able to find the 80% solution, you could get that for $20,000, or likewise $10,000, you could get it for $2,000. And that doesn't always involve software development. Like, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Tim Ferriss, yes.
So that book's not about working 4 hours a week, right? That book's about working 80 hours a week and then and then, kind of like Tim Ferriss did, and then kind of figuring out how to build an organization to work less, right? Keeping that perspective. But, he took those lessons of him doing that and then says, well, how can you get the 80% solution and maybe not work as hard, right? I don't know that you're going to make $1 billion business from his principles, but there's ways that you can go a little further. So, for example, what he says in that book is, rather than launching a whole e-commerce store, if you have a product idea, why not launch a page where you drive traffic to it and see what your customer acquisition cost is? And if that customer acquisition cost, if the economics of that makes sense, then maybe you'd go to the next step. So I think oftentimes talking with a web development agency, we work with folks all the time who are doing this, like actual full-on development. It can become a little bit like the crocodile telling the rabbit to jump in his mouth to cross the river, right? Like it's kind of a dangerous thing because it's in their best interest to make a really big project. And what we want to kind of help people with is realizing that they can do this with very little money, and then they can test the waters, and they can pivot very early to achieve what their ultimate objective is. And that might not require any web development. It might require some very minimal testing with a platform like Unbounce or an Optimizely A/B test or something like that. Does that make sense?
That perfectly makes sense. So you kind of help them to develop the initial prototype and see how it is actually working. Pretty much the lean startup model. And
yeah, exactly. Test your assumptions and validate and all that stuff.
And pretty much go with it, and it works. Take the next step and proceed on further. Pretty interesting. So you have a lot of entrepreneurs already signed up for that particular project?
We have worked with people in the past to help. I mean, oftentimes it kind of crosses over because we do this as a part of our regular web development as well. We help lay out the costs. We don't do it as in depth of like potentially trying to invalidate their assumptions. But yeah, we've worked with a number of people for helping them pivot on their ideas before they sink a bunch of cash into it.
That's pretty nice, Casey, because not many organizations who help the entrepreneurs, especially on this particular area. They try and they come up with the ideas and they say, this is what we want, and the agency start building up. They don't know whether that's going to succeed, not succeed, but you're there helping them exactly what they want to be doing.
Bala, I've never seen a project end the way that the folks at the beginning thought it was going to. It always changes, always. And sometimes it changes, it doesn't pivot or change in time. Sometimes it does, but through, taking into account a few very simple principles at the very beginning, you can dramatically increase the potential success of a venture.
Absolutely, makes sense. Very good. So that is one of the packages that you give, and apart from that, you also work with most of the open source environment, for especially for the development side of it. So, just take us through how do you kind of, expanded your business since 2010 till today. What are the processes you kind of go and acquire new business and get new leads and other things?
Yeah. So a large percentage of our business is referral and organic, traffic. So we spend a lot of energy and time learning about search engine optimization. We get leads from our website. We also look for other departments within our clients. We have some, pretty large clients, and at a Fortune 100 companies, they have a lot of other departments that need help, and we work really hard to build a good reputation as advisors and engineers to where we do get referred within organizations. I mean, we've had single organizations where we've gotten maybe even 20, 30 projects out of a single engagement. So,
wow.
Our reputation is really important. One of the reasons I like to be at the size that we're at is that we don't have to have a gigantic business development machine grinding away, pulling in leads that are maybe not the most optimal for us. So we do have a business development person. That was actually a new development for 2016 as a part of our 2016 plan. He's doing great. And really that was an effort to take a lot of the work off of me because I was able to handle the job, but I wasn't able to, it was making me focus on some things that I think weren't the most optimal things for me to be focusing on. Like I could be focusing on our product development and optimizing our actual organization to make it more efficient and make it a happier place to work. So, but we're also networking, we're going to trade shows, we're doing all the standard stuff that you would expect. And we've just grown, we've hired as we've grown, and we're at the size we want to be now. So we don't have to try to grow anymore, it takes a real burden off of your shoulders when you're not trying to always be growing and always dealing with the growing pains of learning how to deal with your new size, essentially.
Very good, pretty interesting. So you do the development part alone, or you kind of do the post-development part in terms of like promoting that particular site or the app or anything that you kind of develop for them on the real marketing side of the business?
You mean once they've developed it, actually doing the marketing as well?
Yeah.
So we will consult on growth hacking strategies and marketing strategies. We can help with some of that stuff. It's probably not our core business. So, oftentimes, there's a lot of resources out there that you can use to know. I mean, there's maybe 13 things that you can do. And I think there's a book, Traction or Getting Traction with Your Ideas or something. It was written by the guy who did DuckDuckGo, privacy search engine. Yes. I mean, all those things are laid out there, right? All you've got to do is execute on those things. And oftentimes that's what entrepreneurs are doing, right? They're already doing those things. So they're out moving and shaking and making that stuff happen. So aside from consulting on link building strategies or leveraging social media, a lot of that stuff is something that those entrepreneurs are actually implementing. We just help them help get the resources in front of them.
Perfect. Fantastic. Okay, now let's talk about the most important thing. Like, of course, when I looked into your site and kind of gotten deep with where you are and what you're doing, that's why I kind of accidentally came into that accidental evil that you kind of spoke about. Pretty interesting. I'm a big fan of what you actually wrote there in that article. Let's kind of talk about that. What is accidental evil, and take us through that.
Yeah. So there's a number of things that I think illustrate this, and it's basically a phenomenon that happens because people are really bad at looking really long term. Like really smart people look long term, but when people are very busy, which is I think more and more kind of a symptom of our age, with Slack notifications popping up and smartphones giving us email alerts, we get even our mental space gets gobbled up, and we lose patience, and we lose our ability to look even long term, right? We're just looking short term. We're dealing with the short term solution. And I guess two things happened to me. One was kind of just an observation over many years, and one was a really profound thing that just kind of blew up my mind. First one was dealing with clients when everybody's running around, like a madman trying to keep everything going. They would oftentimes get confronted with problems, and the solution that would be put in place would just, if you imagine a weed growing up in your front yard, they would just chop off enough to make the weed go away, right? But the root remained, and then it would grow back, and then they would put another short-term solution, but just chop off the top. And we would deal with that for years, and nobody would ever go, just an inch deeper to get out the root. It's not that much extra work, right? You're already bending down, you're already getting your fingers dirty. Why not just stick a screwdriver in there and pull out the actual root, right? But people don't have the time to do that because it is a little bit more time, and they don't have the energy. So they deal with this tax that they pay year after year after year for this problem. And I thought that was really fascinating because when nobody would ever take that big perspective into mind, but they could have potentially solved the same problem 10 times. And when you took the time that they spent on that, they spent 100x what they could have spent if they had just done it, at the root at the very beginning. But I think more succinctly, where I had kind of the epiphany moment, I have a tenant or a condo here in the Bay Area that we rent out, and my tenant called me and said, "Hey, we've got a garbage disposal that needs to be replaced." And I said, "Okay, well, let me come down and take a look." And I asked him what was happening, and he said that when he starts the garbage disposal, all the stuff on the countertop basically shakes off. I mean, the toaster, the microwave, everything falls on the ground. I was like, wow, that seems really dramatic, right? So sure enough, that's what happened. And I looked underneath, and underneath the sink, there's a little ring that holds that garbage disposal up to the drain. And I don't know anything about garbage disposals, right? But I just reached under there, and I tightened that garbage disposal a quarter inch, right? Just a tiny amount. And when I flipped on the switch, everything hummed perfectly. Now, if you think about the two, I had my epiphany moment because I thought about the two possible paths that I could have gone down, right? I could have got somebody down there to fix it, and it probably would have cost me $500, $600, $700 to get a new garbage disposal and get it repaired, maybe even $1,000. I don't know how much garbage disposals are. But the alternative was slowing down and looking at the root cause of the problem and ignoring the fact that it is an old garbage disposal. But just saying, like, how can we optimize this small thing? And, tweaking that ring cost me no energy, no time, and it was a better solution. So when you think about an organization, it's tempting to come into an organization and see all this shaking everywhere and think, we need to get a new CEO in here and fire everybody and get a whole new team in here. But oftentimes, it's really just these tiny little things that need to be tweaked and optimized. And an organization is even worse, because shaking in an organization shakes other rings in the organization and other rings, and then you get this compounding exponential effect that is really, really deadly. And so that to me, I read a lot, and I read a lot about organizational theory and management. And I feel that at Ricochet, we do a few very basic, actually at all of my companies, we do some very basic practices that prevent that garbage disposal ring from ever getting loose. And when it does, we just tighten that rather than tossing the whole thing out. Or even worse, what a lot of folks do is they just bury their head in the sand and hope it goes away. I can give you two examples that are more relevant to the day-to-day, I think, for listeners.
Perfect.
The first one is something very specific to agency work, I think, is we have a QA cycle. So developers we use Jira, which is a software project management tool. We have a very granular flow. So tickets move from to do to in progress to potentially blocked or pull request review status. And then from there, they get approved. They move to QA, and then QA, they go to stage, and then they get user acceptance testing from the client, and they move to ready for production, and then they go to production. So one of my developers came up to me and said, hey, Casey, this is in our one-on-one. So we spend every week with everybody in our company to give them 10 minutes for them to talk about what is important for them, 10 minutes for the manager to talk about what's important for him, and my partner and I are the managers, and then 10 minutes for their growth, right? So in that one-on-one, the developer said, hey, I'm kind of bummed because I had to work late last night because there were maybe 7 or 8 tickets that we had done. They went to QA. They didn't get QA'd until the last minute before the demo. And then they got reopened for some reason. And then now I've got to scramble to get these things ready for the demo tomorrow. And they could have been QA'd 3-4 days ago, right? It was a 2-week sprint. Why did these have to wait until the day before to get done? And the reality is that the QA person isn't thinking about the impact on the developer, right? They're busy with work too. They're not thinking, it's possible that they could have changed their behavior ever so slightly. Like they just picked a random order of tickets. They could have prioritized ones that have a sprint coming up ahead of the ones that don't, and changed, that developer wouldn't have worked late, right? We would have gotten the stuff done more quickly and maybe more thoroughly, because we could have potentially done a couple rounds of back and forth before it went to the demo. But instead we end up in this scramble all the time. And as a leader, it was up to me to say, wow, that's a problem, because it happens all the time, right? And how can we solve this problem? And we had a discussion about, we do a lot of metrics at Ricochet. How can we track the velocity and the momentum? And we came up with 3 metrics that track the health of a sprint. And then we can track these and see when sprints are having problems. And then I can give the team feedback on how to adjust their behavior to have a more efficient outcome. Or the organization can change, because it's possible that we're doing things as leaders that are causing people to behave in this way, right? Like maybe, and in fact, we found this, we didn't have enough QA people, right? So we were forcing one person to do way too much work. And so by giving somebody the opportunity to bring this up, we were able to uncover a lot of problems in our company that didn't require much work. And in fact, more QA people brings more revenue for the company, right? Like it's a no-brainer, but we just weren't thinking about that because nobody was thinking about it, right? So the other example that I think is really dramatic is I have a Volkswagen Touareg SUV. And every time I get in this thing, I don't know if this is other models, I just know my model, but I imagine it's for all Volkswagens. When I get in it, the navigation system, when I go to do the voice navigation, I say, I want to go to this place. And it says, okay, what city do you want to go to? And I say, Oakland. And it says, which Oakland do you mean? Do you mean Oakland, New York, or Oakland, Virginia, or Oakland, Washington? It goes all the way down. I have to paginate twice to get to Oakland. Now, the moment I press the pagination button, it pops up and says, hey, don't type while you're driving, right? And then so I have to click that. And then I finally find Oakland, California, which is literally 5 miles away, right? And then it lets me continue. Now, that might seem like a minor deal, but I would be willing to bet, Bala, that people have been run over while somebody is distracted dealing with this pagination on the car. Because the reason they're using hands-free and voice navigation is because they are driving, right? So if you back up, when the developer was developing this navigation, he probably had two options, right? He could sort by, it was just a SQL query, right? It's like, select all the cities that sound like what this person said and sort by, I don't know, alphabetical, right? So they sort by alphabetical. And that ends up making everybody paginate for the city, right? It would be very easy. It's a GPS tool. I imagine it wouldn't take more than a couple extra hours of development, if even that. It might have taken 1 minute of extra development to just sort by geolocation, right? Sort by distance. That's what makes the most sense. And in fact, my buddy works at Tesla, and he said that's what Tesla does, right? I mean, it's not that hard to do that. And it was a decision that somebody made at some point. And since then, like I said, I would be willing to bet that people have been run over and gotten into really horrible accidents. People have probably died as a result of that decision. And that's kind of the crux of accidental evil, is at the beginning, somebody could have made a slightly different decision based on a slightly larger perspective and could have changed countless people's lives or your own life in the long run through that decision. It was no extra cost, but it had a dramatically more negative impact in the world. Does that all make sense? I know I'm giving a bunch of kind of wide-ranging examples.
No, this is very, very perfect examples here. Now, one thing what is very interesting when you're talking about accidental evil, okay, and also I have one particular point which I really wanted to talk to you about was you literally focused on those areas like if that particular point was kind of taken care of, probably the future thing or the future rings that's going to be affected can be resolved. But that's seeing the negative side of the business or negative side of the whole environment or the scenario. Okay. Now the same thing if you have to put it in the positive side of it. Now imagine everything has been said, done, and looked into a most positive way. Do you think that we'll miss this particular opportunity, or is it entirely a different way to look into it?
You mean by looking at, you mean the inverse of accidental evil, or you mean like an organization that practices avoiding it, like their impact, or how maybe you could clarify a little bit.
If the whole organization kind of sees every activity that they do in the most positive way, okay, and when they kind of do it, potentially we could avoid these, the rings that you're kind of talking about, the accidental evils that people kind of do it. Okay, that's because there's some kind of negativity that kind of led them to this particular area, which gave the future effect.
Yeah.
What if we kind of help people to some kind of a program that kind of gives the positive vibes, so that we avoid this in the very first place?
Yeah, of course.
And
that's what I want to do, right? That's what I'm saying is, there are a couple things that you can do to avoid accidental evil, and they're not that hard in reality. So if organizations can practice those things, it's kind of hard though, because I mean it's not hard to do them, but it's hard organizationally to slow down sometimes. And there's a quote in Spanish that translates to, "I go slowly so that I can go quickly," right? Instead of running around with the chicken with your head cut off, there are some activities that you can do that will reduce your overall cost to the organization. And like I said, one-on-ones are one thing that you can do, right? So I was just telling you how we do that with everybody in our team. That lets you catch things very early in your organization, because really what it comes down to, I have a one of the things that accidental evil, or the concept of accidental evil, is it's not a humanitarian philosophy, although it can have that impact. I'm not saying we should avoid accidental evil because it's necessarily because it's better for people. I'm saying very concretely that your costs are lower, your turnover is lower. People are happier, so they don't quit as frequently, and they make better products. There's a very concrete bottom line to this. It's just good business to do these things. So it's not just, I think we should be fluffy because I think it's a good thing, right? It's a business philosophy. But the other thing that you can do is create a culture of feedback. Making it so that people don't feel like they have to wait until they just can't take it anymore and then they explode to give somebody some insight into their perspective, right? At Ricochet, we do feedback all day, every day. It's very minor. It takes literally 5 seconds. And then the last thing is coaching. So when somebody on your team is not doing so well, or just needs some help, how can we help with love, coach them and bring them up basically in line with what the expectations of the organization are, rather than saying if you don't do it you're fired, or just waiting and then conveniently needing to lay people off who are those people who you're concerned about, rather than helping to coach them and grow. And so these are all ideas that I got from a podcast, and actually they're management consultants. They've written books. Managertools.com. I learned this. I found this very early in my career, and it kind of changed the whole trajectory of everything that I was doing. When I see businesses that I invest in, I look for opportunities where there is accidental evil happening, and then I put these things in place, and then the organization thrives and flourishes and becomes worth a lot more. So it's a really powerful tool. There are other things that you can do too. Like I'm a big proponent of the DISC personality assessment tool. We use this at our company. All the companies that I'm involved in, we use this. It's a really powerful tool for gaining perspective and understanding other people's where they're coming from in the way that they approach their life and their work and their behavior. It's a tool for empathy, right? There's all sorts of things that you can do this. And then in the case of the navigation system, I suspect that the engineer who was using it, or that was programming, just never used it, right? He probably doesn't even have a Volkswagen. So he didn't even think, right? It didn't pass the basic usability test on the road. And how could he be expected to make these decisions if he's not actually using the stuff and being out there and iterating on it? I'm really surprised that they haven't changed that. I have a 2012 Touareg. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 years. How have they not changed that? It baffles me. But it's not Volkswagen's problem. It's not a big enough deal to complain about. So they've probably never gotten the feedback, and therefore they don't ever change it, right? So that's in and of itself is a way of a type of accidental evil. The machine just doesn't care. It's not on their radar, really. Whereas if it was, they would have a much more usable tool.
Brilliant. That's a pretty interesting way you kind of see the whole management perspective. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So from what I understand is like everything you do in a very process and systematic way, trying to avoid any accidental evil. That's kind of good for the employees who's in the agency, and also most importantly the clients who are actually working with you, because they are going to get things the perfect way, the way in time, the quality stuff, whatever it has to be, they were expecting, and you're kind of really matching it out. Could you kind of take us quickly on the steps that when you have to implement a project, say a web development or an app development, what is that you do from the starting to the beginning, and what kind of project or process that you kind of go through it? Can you kind of take us through?
Yeah, so for web development projects, I think the most important thing is for everybody to get on the same page, because when people, oftentimes when people pay for either our entrepreneur package or a paid discovery, we tell them exactly how much everything's going to cost based on data, right? We actually create user stories with acceptance criteria, and we estimate on those, and we give them a very concrete estimate about how much things are going to cost. And we have some tools that we've developed that will show them if they're on track, because we do time and materials work, but we give them some really powerful tools to stay on track for adjusting their expectations, making compromises, allowing us to recommend things that are kind of the 80% solution rather than the 100% solution. If they don't do that, we start off with a ballpark estimate that we just say, okay, that sounds like it's going to be $100,000, right? And when we start the project, though, we now have to get into the nitty-gritty. Like, what exactly are we going to be doing here? So we go through our discovery process at the beginning of a project, had we not done that as a paid discovery to start, and we'll create all the user stories for everything that they're expecting. We talk about all the acceptance criteria for every single thing that they want. What exactly do you mean when you say, you need to be able to sign in with your, LDAP, right? Or when you need a log out button, what exactly does that mean? Like, where is it going to be? How is that going to play out? So we lay all that stuff out, and then we have a planning poker, agile style. We'll all get on a call together and go through, and the development teams puts out what they think the complexity of each ticket is. And then our tool effectively bundles all that up and says, well, here's what your project's going to cost then. It adds in project management time, technical review, deployment overhead, QA, all as a percentage of the total. And at that point, the client can say, okay, I thought that this was going to be $100,000, but it turns out that it's going to be $150,000 based on what I've been saying, right? Okay, no problem. So how can we work together to adjust expectations, maybe icebox some features or put some things in a second priority to get to where we can get it down to $100,000. And then as we're going, we get a week into it, 2 weeks into it, a month into it. Are we still targeting $100,000, right? If we're not, let's have a discussion. We've had situations where we've come in and, a $50,000 project now is projected to be $20,000, right? It got cheaper as we went along. And why was that? Because we were able to make some suggestions to the client that were the 80% solution. They were able to accept those compromises, and suddenly a ton of work that we thought we were going to have to do, we don't have to do anymore, right? So they got an extra 30 grand that they could apply anywhere in their company, either to this project or other projects, or they could just pocket that as a budget surplus. And we thought that that was a great success. So that's the first step. Everybody get on the same page so that we're not starting thinking we have a ton of money in our budget, and then we get to the end and go, oh crap, we're all out of money. What are we going to do? Which happens way too often in this business, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. When those things, when you do all these things, clients do make mistakes. What are the common mistakes those clients normally make?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake that clients make, and if we didn't have the tools to reinforce this, we would make too, and I call it the bag of M&M analogy. So when you get, Bala, a family-sized bag of M&Ms, right?
Okay.
Peanut M&Ms. You've got so many M&Ms. You're just eating these things by the handful. When somebody asks you for one, you give them a whole handful, right? You're wealthy, M&M wealthy, right? But as you start getting down to the bottom of that bag of M&Ms, you naturally start to savor each one a little bit more, right? Directly proportional to how few you have. Once you see scarcity, then you start behaving differently. When somebody asks for some, you give them one, right? Or maybe you say, nope, I'm going to keep them all for myself. I'm really hungry, right? That's how web development projects go. When we start a project and we see a $100,000 budget or $1 million budget or whatever, we think we've got this giant bag of M&Ms. We can be wasteful with it. Oh, you have this new idea? Sure, let's do it. Let's pull this thing in. Oh, this isn't exactly how you expected? No problem. We'll send it back to the development and we'll iterate on it, right? But the reality is, when we started this project, we were already behind the ball, right? If you do that kind of stuff, you are going to set your project up for failure. Either for us letting it happen, or the client thinking that it's okay to do that stuff, because we have so much money and nobody's even pushing back because the agency doesn't even know it, right? They don't have any tools to tell them how this is going to change things from a budgetary perspective. They're looking at it from a micro perspective, right? They're saying, I'm looking at this one ticket and I'm not thinking about the overall impact. And the only time they think about the overall impact is when they do a report on burn and they send it out to the client saying, hey, you spent 50 grand out of your $100,000 budget. Well, are we 50% done? I don't know. Nobody knows. And in fact, it's impossible to know, because the last 50% of the project, the client could just suddenly start coming up with all sorts of rounds of revision, right? That 50% could stretch to 500%. So to me, this is accidental evil too. We need to, as a service provider, be able to communicate the impacts of the decisions that everybody's making. We need to be partners in this. Just like if an electrician came to your house and you were doing some electrical work, you wouldn't expect them to, when you thought you had a blown fuse, to rewire the whole building and then come and say, yeah, you owe me $10,000. Like, you'd be like, what? I thought this was going to cost me $100, right? Like, how is it this? I would have liked for you to tell me whether I needed to do this, like what it was going to cost, because maybe I don't care about that light that didn't turn on in that room, right? Like, I can just get a battery LED or something. It's not worth 10 grand to me, right? We need to be able to give people the data that they need to make these kinds of value decisions. And I think, clients keeping that in mind and finding a service provider that can give them that information, which is incredibly rare. I've never met anybody who's able to do it the way that Ricochet is able to do it. But just knowing that if you keep coming up with stuff to change and tweak as your idea evolves, which it always will, then you are potentially creating a situation where the agency or the development team is going to lose their shirt, and then they suddenly start cutting corners, right, to get out of the project. And then you've got this kind of pile of unusable code that's going to bite you because it's got so much tech debt in it that you don't even know, but at least it meets the statement of work, so they're done with the contract, right? Nobody wants that. And I guess that's it in a nutshell. Is like, every decision that everybody makes has implications, right? And if both sides are mindful of that and hold each other accountable, projects will be more successful.
Brilliantly said. Very good. Fantastic. Okay, talking about the clients that, they make mistakes. Of course, employees in an organization, in an agency, they also make some mistakes, sometimes taking, not understanding certain things properly, or not understanding the expectations correctly, or entirely, it could be anything else. What are the common things that you have seen, like employees making mistake in an organization?
Okay, so that's a pretty big question. I could talk for hours about that, but I guess a couple things. So the first thing is, when we're very process oriented at Ricochet. Every ticket needs to have an estimate, it needs to have acceptance criteria, and it needs to have a user story, right? The user story is, as a user role, I need something so that some business value is delivered, right? Like those three pieces are really important.
Okay.
The biggest mistake I see from a development perspective is not having one of those three things on a ticket before somebody starts. Because if you think about this, if you don't have a user story and you don't know what the business value is, how could you really develop a thoughtful solution for this problem, right? Because clients do this all the time and development teams do this all the time. They say the user story is make this table with these columns, right? That's not a user story. That's somebody prescribing a solution. But it's possible. We're paying developers to be thoughtful and considerate engineers. So if we lay out the problem for them, they can architect a better solution that may not be what we originally thought was going to be the solution, right? So in the rush, they will start tickets without user stories if they're pushed too hard. But what I say is, nope, you've got to have a user story. And the moment that they start work on a ticket without a user story, our admin team jumps on them and says, what's going on here, right? This is a big deal. It's not a big deal in the micro, but in the macro, it's a big deal. Next thing is acceptance criteria. If you don't know exactly what the client wants, how could you start this ticket, right? Like you guys had some conversation a month ago and you think you knew what they wanted, but they've probably already changed their mind since then. The fundamentals of the reason they were asking for that have changed. And you don't even really remember it that well. So it's highly likely that it's going to get reopened when you demo it to the client, because they're going to say, this isn't what I want, right? So it's tempting for us to always just say, yeah, I get it. Let me just do it, right? And so how we battle that is we look at the reopened rate on tickets. So we say, so if you don't have it, if the developer doesn't know exactly what they want, the client wants, it's highly likely that this is going to get not accepted by the client. So from my perspective, every ticket needs to have very clear acceptance criteria. And we actually track our development team's reopen rate. We look at the average across the entire company, and then we look at each individual developer. And if they're higher than average, then we have some discussions about what are you doing that's causing these tickets to get reopened over and over again. And oftentimes it's that they didn't have clear acceptance criteria. They started development without a very clear understanding of what was going to happen, right? So the last thing that's really important is the estimate. So have you ever heard of Parkinson's law?
Right, yes.
So the amount of work that something takes is going to expand to how much you've allocated to it. If I tell you that I've got this really tough solution, or this really tough problem, and you've got 40 hours to work on it, you're going to be like, great, I'm going to build something really amazing that's going to be an amazing solution. If I tell you that you've got 1 hour to do it, you're going to say, oh, well, we could do this, but we might have to do it in this way or this way or this way, right? That is going to start the creative process, is if you can be held accountable to the amount of time that something is going to take. So in a planning poker, we gain a consensus. People can argue whether it's going to be a big job or a small job or whatever. And then when you get a ticket that you may not have even estimated on, and you see that it's estimated to be a 3-point ticket, then you're like, oh, I was thinking this was going to be a 13-pointer. So I better go talk with somebody, whoever estimated on this, to figure out what they were thinking, because otherwise I could easily see this taking forever. And they might say, oh man, didn't you know about that open source package that you could use? And it makes all this whole thing easy, right? That's how we deliver value to our clients, by holding each other accountable to our estimates. So this is not an agile philosophy. This is actually cheating in agile. But I think it's really, really important, because otherwise people will take a lot longer to do stuff. And then it becomes really hard to be competitive and be profitable at the same time. So those are three things that, from a development perspective, that are really important. I would say the last thing that's really important that employees make a mistake of is being okay with things seeming unfair or kind of crappy, right? Like that's not if you're working at a company and you feel like you're not engaged in your work and you don't feel like you have autonomy and you don't feel like you're being able to practice your craft, that's a big problem, right? Because that means that you're going to get burned out and that the organization is doing something that is causing you to feel this way. So by bringing that up, by giving that feedback, you give the organization the opportunity to help you, right? And I think too few people do that. And that goes from even the same with when somebody upsets you, giving them feedback in a loving way rather than an angry way. And so we have tools to be able to do that. Very simple models that I found from managertools.com. Feedback model, it's amazing. It lets people stay engaged and keep happy in the game much longer than they otherwise would be.
Perfect. Very good. So it's pretty interesting. You use so much of tools. Like, what are the basic tools that you normally use in a day-to-day life of your agency business?
Yeah, we use 20 different things. We obviously use Slack, which we have to make tools to keep Slack from becoming kind of consuming everybody and causing them to lose their lose their mental space, right? Because it can become this urgency addiction tool. We use Skype for video conferencing. We use a lot of internal tools that we've developed to help with estimation and resource planning and keeping tabs on the team, like what everybody's working on at a given time. We use Jira for project management and Basecamp sometimes. We use the Google Suite, so Google Docs, all that stuff. I could go down. We use 20, 30 different tools to do our work.
Cool. Very good. Okay, that's like a lot of information. Quickly, I want to kind of understand that if you have to say one biggest success that you have kind of seen with a customer, what would that be? Can you share some example? Yeah,
so we worked with a company that came to us with a problem streamlining their back-end processing. Huge company. And by working with them to implement a tool that streamlined that, they were able to save in the subsequent quarter $2 million from an investment of $50,000. So they crunched all the numbers. They spent 50 grand, they got $2 million. And we've gone on to do that repeatedly with them. They just always have work for us. But that to me is a huge success because we were able to use some cutting edge open source technology that this company was not used to working with. They're used to working with these really clunky, old, 90s era monolithic software tools. And by pivoting fast and working with the team, we were able to have that success. It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to make something and craft something and see that it's making a real material difference in the world for your clients.
Absolutely, very good. Okay, and any failure stories that you have?
Oh man, as you can tell, I'm kind of I can talk for hours about the various stories that I have, but I think I covered probably the most important ones. I'll spare your audience the tangents.
All right, cool, no problem. Okay, so I guess we pretty much covered most of the questions which I had, and it was a kind of a pretty deep session and a lot of insights you have actually given today. Pretty interesting. So what are your future plans now?
Yeah, so I mentioned that Ricochet is at the size that we want to be at, more or less. Any increase in size that we make is going to come from a business need that we have. So for instance, when we decided that we wanted to have a business development person, they're not billable, so we've got to increase our billable hours a little bit to be able to afford that person. And I think that's a lot different than how most businesses react to business, is they try to gear up to handle that. And I think that's a really toxic thing, because by the time you're comfortable with the size you're at, you're already a different size, right? So I like being at the size we're at because now we have revenue and profit to be able to reinvest into our Ricochet Labs, which is where we incubate our product ideas. So most agencies, I've gathered, want to develop products as well. But it's really hard because their model is geared towards making that almost impossible, because they've always got more work, and then they're always scrambling to feed that billable beast, and they're never able to actually put the mental space into products. And then the flip side, when work slows down, all these people scramble onto product ideas, but it's in such a mad rush that nobody can be thoughtful about how they're actually developing that work. And it's kind of feast or famine, right? It's like drought to all of a sudden gushing rivers of work. So what our plan is, and we're already working on this. We've got one product that is kind of coming out of stealth mode now. We just took it from kind of an internal product to now its own branding. It's in the security vertical, and we're going to push forward on that. I think I've kind of realized that the key to success that I've seen a lot of people fail at is consistently reinvesting time over long periods into iterating and improving rather than jumping from idea to idea to idea when you really haven't given it the opportunity to succeed in the first place. So our future is developing products in addition to our services as an isolated thing, and then being able to spin those companies off as their own entities and potentially raising money or having those be their own thing. And our team has a vested interest in this outcome. That's how we retain them, so that we don't have to keep growing to give them an opportunity to move up, right? They have a financial interest in the success of these products. Brilliant. So that's our future. And we're working hard every week to make that a reality.
Fantastic. Very good. Very good. And I wish you all the best for that. This is pretty interesting, the way you have started and every process that you have actually put inside to run your whole machines. I think it's all perfectly working out. It makes perfect sense when you have the set of developers with you, the right mindset with you. Why not develop a right idea and build a product and just not building for somebody else? Why don't we utilize that particular resources and time?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, we have all the expertise in-house. Why wouldn't you do this? But then why is it so hard for most agencies to do? And I think it's because there's some fundamental things that we've got the deck stacked against us. And unless you try really hard to avoid that accidental evil, it's very rare that it's going to succeed.
Brilliantly said. Very good. Very good. Fantastic. Casey, today's session is pretty very hardcore, and it's going to be helping a lot of agents who have actually been hearing this particular show. And thank you very much for giving us all the wisdom that you have. If people want to contact you, what is the best way they can reach out to you?
Yeah, so either through Ricochet, so Casey at projectricochet.com, my contact info is on there, or the contact page, that goes to me as well. If you go to CaseyCobb.com, that also has all my talks and articles and my contact information. But I would say, Bala, I'm trying to evangelize this idea of accidental evil because I really truly believe that by understanding some of these principles, it will make the world a better place. This is not something that I make money off of. I just like to speak about it. I just like to evangelize the idea. So if any of your viewers have an opportunity to do a guest blog or a speaking opportunity or something that where we can help get this word out, or they're curious about how accidental evil applies to their organization, really encourage people to reach out to me on Twitter or on email or however, so that I can help, because it's something that I've kind of I think is really important for us at this point in technology and our development as a society, really.
Absolutely brilliant, fantastic, and I'm pretty much sure many people will reach out to you. It particularly interested me and the subject that one of the articles that you had in Medium, very interesting. It kind of got me into the curious thing. I want to talk to Casey right now. I'm pretty much sure the ones that would be listening to this would be reaching out to you. One question here: did you coin the term accidental evil? Because I didn't find that anywhere else. Brilliant.
Oh yeah, it's my baby.
Very good, very good, fantastic. Thank you very much, Casey. Really appreciate your time today. And we would be kind of doing one more session probably in some other tape, probably in some others individual topic on accidental evil itself. I'm pretty much sure. And we'll kind of look in that area and talk further on that too. All right.
Awesome.
Until then, thank you
so much, Bob.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Have a nice day.
You too. Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Mondovo Agency One-on-One series. For information on show notes and transcription of this episode, visit us at mondovo.com. If you found the episode worth your time, please do spread the word. Tweet it, email it, and share it with your network. Do keep checking back for more new episodes. Till next time.